What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2002 BMW M5. Huge thanks to Ron at Sport Dimensions for providing me with his really pristine M5 here to review for you guys today. So about the E39 generation of the M5. Well, these really have started to hold their value well, and it's really a high watermark for BMW for many people, and for good reason. This is the last generation that was exclusively manual transmission, so really forced people to, be enthusiasts that are really dedicated to the manual and stuff and the driving experience. And it also was just a subtle but timeless look, so it wasn't quite as in your face as some of the newer M5s. It basically looked like a 540, aside from, you have these little matte black pieces on the bumper there. The fog lights were an exclusive thing, as well as the headlamp washers. And then you just had, of course, the more aggressive wheels and tires, and that was about it as far as, you had a tiny little lip spoiler there on the back, and of course the badging. But other than that, it was very subtle, and especially before this was more common, it wasn't like every manufacturer was doing this back then. This kind of really flew under the radar for most people, and I think it's a really good look. So this one has a few slight little changes, mostly just the grille there you can see is now blacked out, and it gives it an even more sinister look than before here. But the black paint and everything with these bright wheels just looks really great. And it's, just a simple design too, going down to the sides and the back there, it still just had the square tail lamps there, and I love the quad exhaust just kind of hanging out there in the lower part of the rear bumper there. And so overall, I think it's a really good look that has aged so well, and I think will just continue to look good for a long time to come. Whereas for the interior of the 2002 BMW M5, well, it's a very nice and simple, but still a very nice and luxurious place to be as well. So anyway, first thing, sitting down in these seats, you have these really supportive seats here that are, of course, leather and just feel really great. The bolstering here is pretty nice and aggressive, not in an annoying way or anything. It just really hugs you in very, very well. And, they're not as adjustable as the newer M5 seats, but you do have adjustable lumbar, you have this thigh extension, and then, of course, your normal adjustments. But they're really just supportive seats. You don't even need any kind of additional adjustability. They just really feel great. They also tilt forwards and backwards. And so overall, fantastic seats. Next is the steering wheel here in the M5, which is also just a really great wheel. It has just a perfect 9-3 grip. A little bit of a thicker wheel, but this was before BMW went bonkers with thickness on their steering wheels. So it's still a reasonable thickness. It has nice little 10-2 notches, and just a really nice feeling wheel. You have a few buttons here for cruise control and your audio controls, but again, wonderfully simple compared to more modern stuff these days. And so overall, a really great wheel. Next are the gauges, and again, since this is from 2002, it's going to be simpler than modern stuff, but still just all of the basics, everything you need. I love the M fonts and the color scheme they have here, and I also love the active red line you have. So that, of course, is going to be higher whenever the car is warming up and the engine's cold, and then as it warms up, that goes away and slowly, gets down to the actual red line limit there, and that'll stay illuminated, of course. But it's very cool to have that so you don't damage the engine or anything, and really great gauges otherwise. You just have for your basic trip information stuff, which is actually shown here in this center screen coming over to the middle here, and it is very dated. I believe you could still get a standard radio in M5s. You didn't have to get this nav, I don't think, but this one has that option, and of course it's about as advanced as a computer system from 2002 can get. So that means it is ancient feeling, but yet you have your onboard computer for calculating fuel economy and all that kind of stuff, which is cool. This is how they kind of started getting into all that stuff. You also have your navigation and maps, which are, again, very pixelated, very old-fashioned, but it's from 2002. We got to cut it a break. But otherwise, as far as modern connectivity, there isn't any kind of auxiliary jack. There isn't any kind of way to hook anything up. So, really, if you're going to want to, connect a modern phone to these or something, you're going to have to just use an FM transmitter, basically. You could also just pull this out and put an aftermarket thing in, but this one, I really like how original it is, and so I'm glad that he kept that. Coming down, you have your climate controls here, which are, just wonderfully simple, and the very familiar, orange display there. And then you just have your heated seat controls, a couple different mode buttons there, including a sport mode. And this was kind of the infancy of the sport mode. And this one actually does do some meaningful changes where it will actually, give you a sharper throttle response, a little bit of heavier steering, and that's about the extent of it. I think it might also, you have your stability control system, which you can kind of turn off and make that a little more lenient. So great to have all that. Now, as far as storage space in the M5, again, it's a dated vehicle, and modern vehicles now have tons of cup holders and cubbies and stuff. Still, back in 2002, there wasn't a whole lot of that, even in luxury cars. So in the doors here, you have a pocket, two little pockets here, but the other one's a little further back, so that's hard to use while you're driving. But having the one up front here is nice. And then coming over to the center here, you have this little area here that's padded, and you have a little pop-up cigarette lighter, and then you have these two tiny little dinky cup holders that are very flimsy and, as you can see, very shallow. So not great for holding a beverage in here, especially in a vehicle like the M5 where you're taking corners at reasonable speeds and stuff. That is going to be borderline useless, I think. And unfortunately, that is the only cup holders in this vehicle. There aren't even any cup holders in the back seat or anything. So that's all you get there. And then coming back here, you have an ashtray, because that was still a common thing. And then you had a little coin holder here. So again, very small little cubbies. If you have very tiny things to hold, you'll be set. Otherwise, that's it. And then you'd think the center armrest maybe would open up. It does not. You have this little tray here on the top of it, but it does slide forward for better comfort for your elbow there. And it is nice and softly padded, but no storage underneath there either. So you're pretty limited as far as livability stuff goes. Again, it was common for the time, so not a mark against the M5, but again, in modern times, just something. It makes it a little harder to live with. Backseat space in the M5 is also great. So as far as sitting back there and the comfort and the roominess, it's very good. So I'm 5'9". Me sitting behind myself, I have about 3 to 4 inches of legroom to spare. A good amount of headroom, not a ton of headroom, but a couple inches to spare there. And you have little pockets in those doors there with a little ashtray once again. Then looking forward, you do have dedicated air vents, which is great. The fold down center armrest is present there and is actually just an armrest. Usually these days they hide cup holders and other things in there, but this one's just an armrest and that's it. It's also where you'll find your ski pass through, but that's it. No cup holders whatsoever for the back seat there. So if you want to have beverages in this vehicle, you're going to be hanging on to them, and that's it. All right, so setting off here in the 2002 BMW M5. So first thing you notice here about, well, this one is in really good shape. It only has 54,000 miles and has lived a pretty nice life. So it feels very nice and tight, everything. It just basically feels like it does brand new. And I actually worked at a BMW dealership in the mid to late 2000s. So I remember when these were only a year or two old and driving them. And this really drives just about the same as they did back then. So, you have this nice smooth V8, which I'll talk more about in a minute, but it just gives you really smooth power right off the line. I'm really impressed with just how smooth it is. For other things, so you have this manual transmission. 6-speed manual is the only transmission available here in the M5s for the E39 generation here. And so it's a really easy to use manual, though. Obviously, this one's been nicely broken in, but it's still, it's a very clear and easy engagement point, so it's very easy to be smooth. Even as someone who hasn't driven one of these in 10 years, it's very easy to pick up. This one also does have a short shifter on it, and so that makes it a little bit more precise than they used to be, and so that's nice. Another modification, so he has the dine-in front and rear lowering springs too, so we have a little bit more of a button-down ride than you would get with a stock M5, but dine-in was really BMW's go-to tuner, and so it's very much BMW approved. Nothing really too aftermarket there as far as that goes, and so it gives you a slightly lower, I think it's about a half an inch it lowers it, so a little more hunkered down, but just feels really nice. And the thing is, these are so impressively smooth. Now obviously we're on some pretty nice smooth roads here, but it's just amazing how well it glides over everything. And visibility is also great here in the M5s too. You have a pretty thin A-pillar. The hood drops down so you don't even see it here from the driver's seat, and everything, nice large windows all around, great view out of the back. And so a very easy car to drive in that regard. They really got the ergonomics really well done here. But we're gonna hit the sport mode here, and let's turn down onto this back road and see how it does. Here we go. Nice strong punch. All the way to a 7,000 RPM red line here. And this thing just flies. There's a little bit of a shifter booster noise there as I was getting closer, but I wasn't, you know, even getting right to that 7,000, but it will go all the way up to that. I was like 6,800 there shifting. Nice strong power though, a 5-liter V8 engine you have here, naturally aspirated, and so it does 394 horsepower, 395 pound-feet of torque. It was commonly also just referred to as a 400 horsepower V8. Very, very punchy, and again, it's just so smooth, and you have some nice low-end grunt, and so it really feels good. Now, we are just south of Denver, so we are pretty high altitude here, so I would say the owner of this vehicle told me that all the vehicles in this area are basically down about 15% power if it's naturally aspirated, just because, you know, turbos kind of make up for that lack of thickness in the air here. So, but, you know, it's a little harder for the naturally aspirated engines to cope, so, you know, you get a little bit of a faster acceleration there if you were at sea level. But anyway, I mean, these will still, you know, whenever you are in ideal circumstances, be getting 4.7 seconds 0 to 60 with these, which is very impressive, again, considering you're shifting gears yourself. This isn't an automatic that's banging off shifts really quick. So 4.7 just kind of illustrates the amount of power you're working with here, that even with a manual transmission and these tires, which are actually, it's pretty well tired though, so you do put down the power very, very well. You got 245s in the front here, 275s in the rear, and they're Michelin Pilot Sport tires. I think it's a Sport 2s, the older version here, but it really, you know, is very sure-footed and feels very, very nice, and just so much pull here. You know, even any RPMs, but, you know, even the mid-range here, it's pretty nice and punchy. We also have a cold air intake, but that hasn't really affected anything, I don't think. Maybe just helped it breathe a little bit better. We're coming up some corners here, see about the handling. You do have quicker throttle response and heavier steering here in the sport mode. I can certainly feel that heavier steering here, but it's really pretty flat. You have a little bit of a lean, so, you know, they did a really good job of making these a great Grand Tourer. So you have a very comfortable ride. You could drive this thing cross country, and as far as the ride's concerned, you know, no issues whatsoever. But then it still, you know, has a good amount of handling and grip and stuff to really, you know, put up with any kind of aggressive driving you want to do, which is great. And so we don't have any super tight corners here. We're not autocrossing or anything, and we've actually caught up to traffic here as well. But it still does feel really nice on these sweeping corners, and it also feels really nice around corners as well because it's fairly lightweight compared to, you know, modern M5s and even the newer stuff. But these only weigh just under 3,800 pounds. I think it was like 3,792 to be exact. And so part of that's because you only have a manual transmission. Of course, it's only rear-wheel drive. All those types of things help to keep these nice and light. And so it feels really punchy, but I mean, the amount of response you get here right off the bat is really great. And let's go for another acceleration here. This thing, it rips. Oh, it feels great. It's so punchy, man. And I love how, you know, going to 7,000 is great in this thing. It really, it's just a perfect blend. You know, these days, obviously, the newer M5s, as years went on, just got to be overkill, which is very fun. I love overkill. I love spinning tires and not being able to put power down. It's all very dramatic and exciting. But this is, I think, really one of the prime BMW M's where it was really usable. You know, you could really wring this thing out and not be thrown in jail immediately with the amount of power you have. You put it all to the ground. It was all very reasonable and well balanced. Not that newer ones aren't. I mean, the new ones have fantastic handling and fantastic brakes to keep up with the bonkers amounts of power they do these days. But this just, it's a more balanced feel on the street as far as, you know, being able to kind of get on it a little bit more and push it a little bit more, and feel like you're actually using the car and using what it's capable of. With these new ones, you have such high limits that even if you're doing double the speed limit, it feels like a bore because you're just, they've such high limits, and you really can only enjoy that kind of stuff on the track. Versus this, you can enjoy on the street, you can ring it out. And, you know, on higher speed limit roads, you can, you know, take the red line in first and in second and still, you know, be able to get on it and not feel guilty about, you know, going insanely fast. And so I really like this a lot. It's a really nice balance. Obviously, this was kind of a peak period in BMW M history in general. I mean, the E46 M3s from around this time are also famously loved and adored for their great driving characteristics, and I've already reviewed one of those. If you're curious to hear my thoughts on that, they're fantastic fun as well. And so, now we're on this road that has been tar and chipped recently with this gravel pebbles and stuff, but it's pretty solid now. But even still, it's a little bit of a rougher road because of that. And I feel a tiny bit of vibrations through the steering, but I don't feel anything through the seat. And it's just really just glides over this. And even modern vehicles, you really feel a lot of this stuff, and this just glides over all that. All the driver stuff is just, it's so well set up to, again, be luxurious and comfortable, but still sporty. The steering just has great feel that you just don't get these days, honestly, with, more advanced stuff. And so I love that. And if you want to have lighter steering, you can take it out of that sport mode. And then, it's a little more, easy to manage without having quite as much muscle to put into it. But it feels great in either mode. Throttle response, like I said, is razor sharp. There is a tiny bit of a tip-in point before, and then it goes, and then it really is very responsive and feels great. Brakes also, as I lean on them here, feel really good. Again, you have some good dead travel, but that is pretty typical BMW, so nothing new there, and they feel good though. And that is one thing. So you will see in the front bumper of this one that it has this little bit of a cooling duct, and so that's for if you're going to track these. The brakes can get pretty hot, and so that's kind of why that has that. That wasn't factory, but is a reasonable upgrade. So aside from the brakes getting warm though, they work very, very well. Another acceleration just because it's fun. Yeah, it's an interesting little rattle there in the shifter. I'm not sure if that's an aftermarket thing or what, but it's so sweet. Even if you want to hang out at 4,000 RPMs and really exercise this engine, I mean, it pulls so smoothly and so predictably. Again, with turbo stuff, it can kind of get peaky sometimes, and it kind of hits you all at once. It's very evenly distributed and just gives you a nice buttery smooth spread all through the rev range, and it is just glorious. It is just glorious. And I can kind of see now why these are starting to appreciate. They're starting to kind of pick back up, because it has this driver connection, obviously, with the manual and the simplicity of this that you don't often get with other vehicles. And things like this navigation system, again, that was an option. So if you get a simpler one that even has aged better thanks to just a basic radio, then it makes it even easier to live with. Again, the lack of cup holders and cubbies and stuff, if you're used to modern vehicles, is going to be a little bit of an inconvenience. But other than that, I mean, this thing just as a driver's car, it's just fantastic. But again, you still have a very usable back seat. You can take the whole family in this and go for a nice, enjoyable drive. And like I said, it's been about 10 years since I drove one. They were always impressive even back then, but even to this day, it has held up so well. And I think it's actually probably gotten better with age, which really shows just how well they nailed this and the kind of period in time that they were in with these. It was really a high watermark in a lot of ways. The only other thing I want to mention here is the sound of this engine. Now, this one has a stock exhaust, so it's a little quieter, but still just a really great sound to it. And even we'll put the window down for a second here. Second gear. Just sounds so good. Just a smooth kind of German refined V8 kind of sound to it. Then again, just sounds just as smooth and buttery as the power delivery suggests. We've got some walls coming up here to amplify the sound a little more. It's just so responsive. Yeah, it's a fantastic car. I love the E39 M5s. So anyway, huge thanks to Ron for providing me with his pristine M5 here to review for you guys today. Let me know your thoughts on the M5 in the comments below. I honestly can't find anything to complain about. It's really just good through and through. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.